Welcome to the West Ham Voice. Thank you for joining me. My name is Stel. If you're new to the channel, please do hit that like button, the subscribe button, and the bell notification to let you know when I'm next on. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I did a Friday Night Live with Nigel Khan, suggesting that the West Ham United seemed to be finally hitting form at the right time of the season. We'd just come off two scrappy wins against Southampton and Fulham. We got ourselves into the semi-finals of the Europa Conference tournament and then performed superbly against Arsenal to get a draw after being 2-0 down, which was swiftly followed up by a very decent 4-0 away win against Bournemouth. Everything seemed to look rosy. Everything seemed to be on the up. There seemed to be a momentary air of optimism around the club. Had all the players that Moyes signed back in the summer finally found a winning way? We looked to be back to playing a counter-attacking game, which seemed to suit us better. We were getting in the faces of opponents, we were closing them down quicker, and we were being on the front foot. Things looked pretty decent for probably the first time all season. Then, of course, in the past 7 days, things haven't been so great. We suffered our 1-2 home defeat to Liverpool, which prompted me to do the first of a series of shows last Friday called Premier League Relegation Watch. This is the second of those shows. The show aired the day before our trip to Crystal Palace on Saturday, where I suggested that was one of the two pivotal games in our final 6 in the league, which we really needed to focus on trying to get something from. The other pivotal game for me, as I mentioned, is the forthcoming one against Brentford away. As we all know, it was a disappointing 4-3 away defeat to Crystal Palace, which leaves us possibly with just the Brentford game to grab either 1 or 3 crucial points before our final 2 games of the season against our relegation rivals, Leeds United and Leicester, in which we hoped will be enough to keep us in the Premier League next season. However, if we don't get a point against Brentford, what then? Now, I'm fully aware that there are 2 league games before the Brentford one. We face Man City away from home on Wednesday evening, followed up by Man United at home next Sunday evening. Of course, there's another game before Brentford being the Europa Conference semi-final, first leg at home against AZ Alkmaar, but that will take care of itself as my focus is on Premier League survival right now. In the show last Friday, I suggested that there might be 7 teams left in the relegation battle. However, after the results over the past week and weekend, I believe that's now down to 6. Bournemouth winning 4-1 away over Leeds United, giving them 39 points, in my mind, makes them safe. So we're down to just 6 teams, being ourselves, West Ham, Leeds United, Forest, Leicester, Everton, and Southampton. But many are already suggesting that Southampton are already relegated. Now, any team that reaches 37 points or more is likely to be safe. After 2 defeats over the past week, we're still stuck on 34 points, and we're in real danger of being sucked nearer to the bottom 3 if we get nothing from the Man City and Man United games. Are we in danger of suffering perhaps 4 Premier League defeats in succession? If we do, we may be in for a very rocky finale to the end of the season. Of course, we could indeed get something out of the 2 games against Man City and Man United. And if we do, then the pressure's off a little bit, but no one's expecting us to do so. I guess the one consolation we have is that regardless of any results this weekend with our relegation rivals, our league position of 15th will not change. But defeats, as I said, against the Manchester teams and further wins from teams below us over the next couple of weeks could certainly mean that we'll be far closer to the relegation zone than we really want to. The games that are coming up for the teams below us include third from bottom Leicester, who are just 5 points behind us with a game against Everton on Monday evening at home. And then they got Fulham away coming up as well. Should Leicester manage to win both, they go above us. Nottingham Forest play bottom place Southampton at home, then away to Chelsea in their next 2 games. So even they might pick up enough points. Granted, their away form is no good, but then Chelsea haven't been great over the last couple of months either. But Forest against Southampton, I guess they're looking at they'll get 3 points there. But against Chelsea, you never know. Depends on what Chelsea turns up. Leeds have it as tough as we do in their next two games as they face Man City after we play them this coming weekend, and then followed up by Newcastle at home the following weekend. But as we know, again, they might get something out of these games. They're fighting for their lives as well, their Premiership survival. Do I think we'll stay out of the relegation zone after our next two games against the Manchester teams? Yes, I do. But only because those below us have it tough, if not tougher fixtures than us. So what happens in the last two games against Liverpool and Crystal Palace? Why did we lose those games? Well, there are a number of reasons, aren't there, to our that resulted in our defeats. The first of those is, of course, the extremely poor refereeing and VAR decisions that have gone against us. Against Liverpool, we should indeed have had a penalty awarded to us, which both VAR and Chris Kavanagh decided to ignore. Then against Palace, the softest of penalties awarded against us by Craig Pawson, which was, to be fair, yet another example of poor refereeing and VAR inconsistencies that seems to dominate the Premier League. It's decisions like these which could easily get a team relegated, and for two very poor decisions to go against us in quick succession is most definitely a hammer blow, and one that can so easily knock a team's confidence. I think the other reason, of course, seems to go back to what seemed to be squad fatigue again. That deja vu feeling of that we've been here before this in the same time last season. But it isn't like last season, is it? We know that last season we didn't have a squad deep enough to cope with the pressures of Premier League and Europa League as well. In fact, David Moyes, he talked about the possible need to break the team if he had to, but it was basically understood that he would embark on fixing the squad in the summer transfer window by bringing in players who would complement what we already had to ensure that we didn't suffer the same fate again this season, that we would have a squad capable of competing on all fronts without getting fatigued before the season ends. As I've mentioned in previous shows before, for me, the fatigue started and was set when Moyes didn't strengthen the squad in January 2022. But what excuse do we have this time round? 8 players were signed, as we all know, which should, the quality of the players that we signed should indeed enable us to compete on all fronts. So we should not be facing the same issues again. But against Liverpool, we certainly didn't have anywhere near the intensity that we showed in our previous 3 games against Arsenal, Ghent, and Bournemouth. And the game was an utterly frustrating watch. But was I harsh in my analysis and frustration? Several players who started the game against Liverpool had played 3 games in quick succession. So was it any surprise that we didn't play with any intensity? Our midfield 3 of Rice, Souček and Paquetá certainly didn't have the same level of bite that they did before. And they were second to most balls. They allowed Liverpool to control the game in midfield and really sort of take control of most of that game. It sometimes looked as if we were the away team. Could Moyes have changed it up more? Possibly. We then moved on to our game against Palace on Saturday, and there were 2 changes to the lineup that faced Liverpool, with Emerson and Fornal stepping in for Cresswell and Benrahma. But that didn't have the desired effect. Should Moyes have made further change? I mean, it didn't have any effect because he pulled them both off at half time. But should Moyes have made any further changes to that starting lineup? Players such as Soufal, Zuma, Souček, Rice, Paquetá and Antonio were embarking on their 5th game in 13 days. And as a result, most of them looked tired, no intensity. And to cap it all, we lost Zuma to what looks like another injury that could keep him out for several games. In fact, these 5 players make up a small group of players in the squad who have been playing most games for the best part of this season. In contrast, there are several players in the squad who seem to have been grossly underused this season, including Maxwell Cornet, Danny Ings, Manuel Lanzini, Flynn Downs, Alphonse Areola, Ben Johnson, and Pablo Fornals. Now, granted, Cornet was injured for a lot of the season, and Ings only came to the club in January. But despite that, Moyes has had opportunities to give these players more starts than they've actually had. Ben Johnson, he's played this season, but he's looked well below par and lacking in too much belief and confidence. But then Moyes still had Lanzini, or still has Lanzini, Downs, Fornals at his disposal, who, just like Ings and Cornet, have hardly started many games this season. Ings has had 6 starts in all competitions, with Cornet just 3. Lanzini and Downs have had 11 and 12 respectively, but most of these starts have been in European games, which is fine, as it certainly gave other players a rest when they were selected. But this was mainly during the group stages rather than the latter stages of that tournament. In comparison to players at the top end of the spectrum, we've had the likes of Bowen and Rice, who have both made 40 starts this season, Souček on 34, Soufal on 30, Paquetá on 29, Benrahma on 27. So you can see there's a significant difference in how many games players in the squad have been utilised for. So what does Moyes do now? Many fans are calling for Moyes to mix it up when we play Man City this coming Wednesday, so that players such as Declan Rice, Paquetá and Antonio can get the rest they need in order to be fresh for the game against Man United at home, which many fans believe we have more chance of getting something from. Good strategy or a bad one? I don't know. I'm in two minds over it. If Moyes has truly been behind all the players he signed, if Moyes has truly been behind the player signings of the summer, as well as the signing of Danny Ings in January, then surely he should trust them to do a job for the club. Would using Downs for Souček be any worse? Would Fornals coming in for Paquetá not provide us with a different impetus in the centre of the park? What about giving Bowen a rest and using Cornet in that position? Surely Cornet's pace would be a valuable asset to have against any team. Now, I'm not suggesting that these changes should be permanent, but maybe, just maybe, some fans are right in suggesting that maybe rest a few players against Man City and then use them against Man United after that rest. I don't know. I mean, some of these players are good. You look at Cornet, you look at Downs. Downs hasn't let us down anytime he's played. Cornet, he's got a lot to offer, but he needs a good run. He doesn't need 5 minutes at the end of a game. Give him a start. Let's see how he gets on. You could always change him like he did, like Moyes did at the weekend with other players. So some of these players, maybe giving them a start, seeing how they get on, and then if it's not working, changing things might not be a bad decision to make. But if Moyes doesn't do this, if he doesn't freshen it up, if he doesn't make any changes, again he runs in. He may run a number of players into the ground by overplaying them. How would that affect us in the final games in both the Premier League and the Europa Conference League? Unlike last season, where we had a cushion because we played so well in the Premier League in the first half of the season, we don't have that cushion this time round. Our precarious position could result in relegation, which must surely be unthinkable for the squad that we have. But as the saying goes, there's no such thing as too good to go down.